literally the person who's just had sex and the person high on cocaine, very similar things happening in the brain, which just, I mean, that would indicate to me you're high.
Yeah.
And most people who are high don't make very good rational decisions. Hey, welcome to the Dating Detox Show, your place to have real conversations about relationships that actually is healthy and works. Right, Megan? Is that the goal?
That's right.
That's
That is the goal.
So if you have
Yep.
not grabbed the free Modern Daters Playbook yet, you can either go to datingdetoxshow.com, or if you're on YouTube, check out the description area. If you're listening on platforms for podcasts, just check out the show notes. So with me today is the one only master coach, Megan Thoma, and I'm glad that you're here. This is going to be awesome. I'm excited.
I am too. I'm ready. Let's do it.
How has your week been?
My week has been good. My week has been really good. I've been looking forward to this all week though. So I'm very, very excited. I told you I could just talk for hours and hours with you about this stuff. So yeah.
Well, we will not do it for hours. So people who are listening can temper their expectations. But I'm excited.
Yeah.
We are talking today about 5 reasons not to have sex before marriage, which I know we already lost like 95% of the audience. But let me set the table from this standpoint. So I am a Christian. Faith is important to me. I do believe that God's word, the Bible, is clear that sex was designed for inside the covenant of marriage. So I believe that. But what I've also found is that many times working with Christian couples in the church, a lot of them are having sex anyway. And so for me in this episode, you're not going to hear me quote a whole lot of Bible verses. I'm not going to be saying, well, here's where God says this and here's where God says this, because my belief is if I have to convince a Christian that that's really what God's word says with some Bible verse, it's probably not going to be successful anyway. So my foundation is I do believe that God's design is best, period, in life and relationships. And he has clearly indicated that sex is healthiest, safest, best, has the most freedom inside the context of marriage. But the 5 reasons I'm going to give today, none of them are Philippians 5:7 says or whatever. I just made it up. That's not really one on sex, but you get the point. So I've got 5 reasons that I believe we should rethink whether we should have sex before marriage. And then I want to hear you weigh in. We're going to have a discussion back and forth. That sound reasonable?
Yes. Very reasonable. I'm in. Let's do it.
All right. So we'll just start with the first one. I think reason number 1 is that sex blinds us. And let me say it this way. Sex binds us chemically, which also means it will blind us. So I think having sex in a relationship will impair our vision a little bit when it comes to recognizing issues in the relationship and the other person. And so I know you've studied this a lot. You know, researchers have told us when you have sex, all kinds of chemicals, oxytocin, vasopressin, all these chemicals get released. And those were designed to bring us together, bind a couple together, create more closeness, which in the context of a committed, healthy relationship is fantastic. Outside of it, it might be a little dangerous. So what are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. And, we were talking about this before we got started too, that a lot of the women and just people that I work with in general, they come from different faith backgrounds. So the way that I typically teach this, just so that I can reach people at the level that they're at or where their value system is at, is that it really does serve you, all of us, so much more greatly and so much better if we wait till we're at least in a committed relationship. Obviously, marriage is the ultimate commitment. But for people that can't, for whatever reason, subscribe to that idea, okay, can you wait till you're in a committed relationship? Because otherwise, you are just freely connecting with so many people and setting yourself up for so much heartbreak and disappointment when you share that sacred intimacy with someone who isn't even committed to you. It's just, when you really think about it and feel into it, It doesn't make a lot of sense. It is truly like setting us all up for heartbreak. So I
Yeah,
completely
but a
agree.
lot of people would just say it's just physical. What are you talking about? It's no big
Hmm.
deal.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's no big
Yeah.
deal. Just a physical
Yeah.
thing. That doesn't happen.
Right. And if it is just physical, in so many ways, that to me is saying you really are disconnected from true intimacy.
Right.
Because just,
Right.
playing sports is just physical, right? Like going for a run, that's just physical. But like sharing, like you are literally connecting your bodies together. It's not just physical. There is so many hormones and chemicals released that bond us, especially. Well, I'll get to the part about women and how our bodies connect to men more differently as you
Right.
get down
Right.
the list. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
not just physical.
I've read where they did brain scans of people both on cocaine and right after sex, and said they saw very similar reactions
Yeah,
in I'm not a brain guy. I don't know if it was the prefrontal cortex or where it was,
yeah,
but literally the person who's just had sex and the person high on cocaine, very similar things happening in the brain, which just, I mean, that would indicate to me you're high.
yeah,
And most people who are high don't make very good rational decisions.
exactly, exactly.
And so if I'm having a bunch
Hmm.
of sex with somebody that I don't even know if they're trustworthy, I don't
Yeah.
know them very well yet, and we think we do, but
Oh yeah.
ultimately you can't. Time, right, is the great truth teller
Yes.
of who somebody really is. It is going to put you in a position where you will be unconsciously blind to some stuff in the relationship that may be unhealthy or dangerous because we're just in love.
100%. Uh-huh. And I tell women all the time, this is one of my favorite mantras, and they seem to get a kick out of this when I say it. I tell women all the time when we get so excited about someone we just meet and we create this fantasy in our minds of like, this is the perfect person. No, you don't understand it. Like, after one date, I know he's the one, or after 5 dates, I know this is it, whatever. And I just remind people and women, particularly that I work with, you don't know him yet. You don't know him yet. Tell yourself that. Like, you can tell your friends, you know what, y'all, I am so excited, but I don't know him yet. So, do
Do
you
they
really want to?
listen to you?
Sometimes but it's kind of a way to bring us back down into reality. Because just like how, sex releases all these like crazy feel good hormones, so is that intoxicating feeling when you just meet someone and it blinds us from the truth of who they are. We don't know them yet. So if we can remind ourselves, like, this feels really good. I'm very excited about this person, but I don't know them yet. And do I really, again, want to share that kind of intimate space with someone that I don't even slip and know yet?
Yeah. But again,
Yeah.
we think after 2 weeks of we've been up till 2 in the
Yeah.
morning talking, we
Right.
really know somebody.
Right. Right. It's laughable. I mean, you've maybe shared some intimate space talking and connecting, but have you seen who they are at their worst? Have you been through a conflict with them yet to see how they resolve it? Have you seen them in real life with friends and family? Do you know some of their like deepest shame? And it's like, no, you don't know them yet. You don't.
Right.
You can't know someone that fast.
And that's probably
Sorry.
a whole nother show about what
That
we
is.
should really be giving emotionally early on in a relationship. You're like, don't tell
Totally.
him something you ain't never told anybody else just because you feel safe with it. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a
People
different
have
show.
to
That's
earn
not
your
this.
vulnerability. Yeah. Yeah. We'll
All
keep
right.
going.
So one reason is I think the chemical releases blind us to the realities of the relationship. It just makes it harder for us to see what it is. That's one reason. A second reason I would say is that sex weakens us. And so I'll give context for that. So many times I hear people. So when I used to lead a premarital class at our church, I would ask the couples, it was a 6 week long class. And so I would ask the couples if they'd be willing to do a purity pledge for that 6 weeks. If they haven't been having sex, good, stay with it. If they have been, would you be willing to stop for 6 weeks? Just
Okay.
because I believe pulling that off the table would allow them to open their eyes and work on some other stuff. And then we'd have discussions at the end, about how did they do and that kind of stuff, because week 6 was all about sex. And so many of them, I'd hear them say, oh man, it's just so hard. We can't keep our hands off each other. And
Mm,
and we highlight this idea of like I just you are so attractive and so intoxicating. I can't keep my hands off you. And we look at that as like this flattering thing, right? Oh my gosh, that they're just so
yeah.
drawn to me. And I always get them. I say, okay, well, let's just take that thing. You're telling me this person can't keep their hands off you, they can't control themselves. And I said, let's play that character quality 5 years down the road. Play the movie forward. They're
Yep.
on a business road trip without you at the bar. Is that the same character quality you want? Someone who can't keep their hands off something when they're intoxicated?
Mm,
So it's like
so good.
we just don't even think about the fact that you're elevating this thing is great. And I'm like, a lack of self-control
It's
is
not great.
not the greatest quality we want to be looking for in somebody else. And so I think when we kind of endorse ourselves in that area, like, oh, we just don't have self-control in this area. We think it's neat because it's all about our love and romance, but that actually weakens us in other areas. So do you not have self-control over here? And what about, do you have self-control over here? So I think what we think is a neat thing, "Oh, I can't keep my hands off you," actually, to me, kind of may weaken us in other areas. Where's our self-control? What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Oh, that's so good. I've never really put it together that way, and I love that because, one of my mentors always says, "How you do anything is how you do everything," right? So it's like, okay, cool. So you can't even have the discipline or the self-control here with me. So how is that affecting other parts of your life? And I also think about, okay, if that is, you know, s- you take it as a compliment. I would take that as a compliment, right? Like, oh my gosh, someone's just so
Yeah,
enamored with
for
me.
sure.
I'm
I'm that
so
amazing.
desirable. Yes. I mean, who doesn't want to feel like that? And that's not sustainable. Like, and we're talking marriage, we're talking life with somebody, right? So now, if that's the precedent, if that's how we're being, and then that starts to fade in a few years, then it turns it's like, what's wrong with me? Why aren't you attracted to me anymore? Why don't you want me anymore? It's like, that's not how, in my opinion, that is not building a healthy foundation. My gosh. And I think personally that discipline is actually so sexy. Like we have to have discipline in so many areas of our life to be successful. So if we can do it over here, we can do it over there. But if we can't do it over here, how are we going to do it over there? So yeah,
Yeah, I'm just sometimes I'm too logical, I guess, and maybe, you just got to go with the flow, but that just it just logically makes no sense to me that we're
yeah,
celebrating an inability to control. But I think we all do this. We all think we're the exception. It's kind of like people who have an affair.
yeah,
It's like, well, I'm kind of I had a talk recently about this with somebody. Obviously, I talk with a lot of couples where it's been the case,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
um, but I was having that conversation, and the stats say that only 3% of, say, I think the research was on husbands, but husbands who had an affair, only 3% of them actually leave their spouse for the affair partner.
Right. Yeah.
And but even those, my concern is the only thing you really know about each other is that the other person is willing to be unfaithful, right?
Correct.
here's
Correct.
here's the foundation of your new relationship, the one
How
thing
does
you
that
both
create
know.
safety? Yeah.
But in our
Yeah.
mind, we're like, well, the only reason they did this was because we had something so special or we were
That's
so amazing. And I'm like,
right.
I don't care how amazing, how good looking, how rich, how
No. Of
whatever fill in the gap is, there's probably somebody else out there that
course.
hits that
Yeah.
a little better. So that to me is another one of those things. Like it just doesn't make logical sense. If you
We're
can't
not
control
that
yourself now,
special.
where else can you not control yourself? And I certainly don't want a spouse who couldn't keep their hands off of me to be on road trips and be in a spot where maybe they can't keep their hands off of something else.
So well said.
All right.
Agreed.
So that's number 2. Number 3 is sex confuses us. And here's what I mean. We often don't realize that sex before marriage, sex while dating has, well, just dating in general. Dating has an agenda, marriage doesn't.
Yeah.
You're trying to win a person over
Mhm.
and you're competing with other options. And marriage has relational dynamics that dating doesn't.
Mhm.
Got to pay bills together. You got to parent. You got to do all kinds of stuff. So they're kind of two different relationships. And so sex in the context of marriage is supposed to be about connection, intimacy, vulnerability, those kind of things. Sex outside of marriage generally is about performance. I want them to think I'm good. And nobody wants to be bad in bed. So
Right.
everybody's at their best game. Everybody's doing stuff. A lot of people are doing stuff that they don't like. A lot of people are doing stuff that may cause shame.
Yeah.
We're doing stuff because the fear is if I'm not doing this stuff, somebody else may. And so it confuses the issue. We got performance minded stuff here. And then you don't, again, you don't know how many married couples that I talk to, like when we were dating, being sexual, so and so was doing all this stuff. And then we got married and they didn't want to do it. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's because they didn't like it. They were performing and now they're in the context of marriage. And why would you want a spouse doing something that either causes shame or they just frankly don't like? That's not going
Yeah.
to cause connection and intimacy. That's going to cause disconnection. So, but a lot of people are like, man, I got duped. They were all about this over here. And then now we got
Mhm.
married and they're not about it. They tricked me, I'm like,
Yeah.
no, that they did what we set them up to do, which is in dating, perform, and now you're in marriage and it's not supposed to be about that. And so I think that alone can confuse the relationship. And it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. I love that we are talking about this. So many of my clients get stuck in this performative role. Like they are so concerned, like, am I going to be good enough? Is it going to be enjoyable? And every time they do that, I bring them back to, so where is this desire for intimacy and connection really coming from? Because when we're in the performer role, it really, like you said, it disconnects us. There is no connection when we're trying to impress the other person. It's inauthentic. Um, so and it makes sense, right? It's like, okay, I'm trying to win them over. I'm trying to pull them in with my amazing skills, let's say in
Right.
bed. And I'm also trying to do that because there is no foundation of commitment here. I'm trying to win them to commitment versus being in commitment and not being in performing, but actually being in pleasure and enjoyment and true like soul, heart, body connection with someone that there is a covenant here. There's a commitment. So um, yeah, it's just another way that we really do a disservice to ourselves and disconnect from what it is we say we really want, which is like true intimacy and to be seen and loved by one person.
That's why, what do you tell people when because I hear a lot of people talk about, we got to make sure we're sexually compatible. We got to make sure we got sexual chemistry before marriage. Cause otherwise we're going to get in here and it's like, oh my gosh, this is not what are your
I'm like, if you're
conversations around that?
already attracted to the person, I do think you can tell a lot by a first kiss, really, or just kissing in general. It's like if
Sure.
you're already attracted, you're gonna be compatible, and the compatibility isn't even based upon your freaking like backflips in the bedroom. It's not about that. It's about true shared intimacy, which is the person seeing, into me you see the depths of who you are, your pain, your suffering, your struggle, and your joy, and your desires, and what lights you up in the world, like really being seen. It's not about the moves or the positions or like, right? It's not. And I also believe that having that sort of safety of a committed relationship, marriage, that actually allows so much freedom for exploration to really like let your inhibitions, wild and free, however that wants to look like. Like
Sure.
there's so much room for that and so much freedom for that in the safety of a committed relationship.
Yeah. No,
So,
I agree.
yeah.
And there's zero research, and from my experience working with tons of couples, there is zero evidence that sexual chemistry before marriage actually translates to good sex in marriage. Because again,
Right.
it's a different game. You got performance, you got different things, and I've seen it once, I've seen it 100 times. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Number 4 reason not to have sex before marriage. Sex separates us. And so this seems counterintuitive because I already said it binds us, right? But I'm saying it from this standpoint. Sexual intimacy is the quickest, easiest, laziest way to feel connected to somebody. So if I don't if I'm inept emotionally, if I don't want to do the work of building emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy, recreational intimacy, intellectual, all the other aspects of a relationship, sex is the easy one. We have sex, I feel close. Oh man, we got such a great relationship. I know married couples who have unhealthy, toxic relationships. They have a bunch of sex.
Yeah.
That's the only way they know how to feel close. Um, Now they would probably tell you they're close, but when we talk about all the other aspects, I'm like, you guys are dysfunctional. So
Yeah.
from that standpoint, I think we can get lazy, and it's like, oh, we have sex, when we don't cultivate all the other aspects of relationship. And God forbid, if for some reason in the context of marriage, something happens to one of you physically, and that's all you have, now you're
Yep.
like, meh, we're not really close.
Yeah.
That when I say it separates us, I'm saying we become dependent on it alone because it's the easiest, laziest way, and we don't take the time to develop all the other stuff.
Right. Yep. It's the low hanging fruit. It's the quick fix. And I'm actually curious to ask you from a man's perspective. I have had men say before what you just said, right? It is how I feel connected. It is how I bond with somebody. It's how I feel close to somebody. It's like, okay, great. You're allowed to have that. You're allowed to experience that. And what do you typically say to men who have been unwilling, or it's very difficult for them to start to build up the emotional connection, the emotional maturity, or even just the availability to look at, okay, so I'm only available for connection if it's through sex, but I'm blocking myself with intimacy on with this person on all these other levels. Like, how would you kind of coach a man through that, or what?
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
guessing
I
you've seen
would,
that quite a bit.
yeah, I would just encourage them that, that's selfish.
Hmm.
I mean, that'd be so. It would be okay if your wife said that she only feels connected through, emotional connection and deep talks. So she's not going to
Right.
do the
No
physical
sex.
part of it. I mean, it's if one of us going to do it,
Right.
can the other one do it?
Right.
And also try to encourage them. Why would a woman who does not feel connected, safe, valued, want to open up her legs to you?
Right.
And let you close into her space, so is that true? Yeah, I think a lot of guys do feel closer and connected through sex with their wives. That's why you hear the whole, men give love to get sex and women give sex to get love, kind of,
Get love. Right.
the
Right.
just our the nuances of our differences. There's certainly some differences there. Obviously guys can compartmentalize a little more than women and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're just going to go, well, that's just how I connect. And then your wife goes, okay, well then your wife will say that too. And then let's see how well that works for you.
See how it
So
goes. Yeah.
I think there's got to be
Yeah.
a willingness if we're not selfish to say, what does my spouse need from me to feel emotionally
Yeah.
connected? So she actually wants to show up. Because again, I think, obviously depending on the guy and who you're talking to and how you feel like, they're motivated. It's like, well, your wife can probably keep giving you duty sex, but it,
Yeah.
probably doesn't feel very good for you when you can tell she doesn't want to be there, right? Versus somebody
Exactly.
who actually seems like they are interested and sexually attracted to you. So if giving her some of these things on the emotional side helps her show up better for you in that area, I mean, even if you have a selfish motivation, I would think you'd want to partake a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And to the performer part that we were mentioning earlier too, I really believe and maybe not all men are like this. There's no, it's not an all or nothing thing,
Sure.
but I do think that for the most part, men are sort of wired to provide, to please. I think so many men would get pleasure and love actually pleasing their woman, knowing that she is happy and adored and loved and satisfied and in her pleasure and all those things. So it's just interesting to think about how some men, it's like, this is the, this is the go-to way that I feel connection and intimacy. But if you actually led more with your heart, if you led more with the emotional connection, she would just, I mean, we're putty in your arms at that point. Like, it's just, we need that. So, and
Sure.
I actually think we all need it, but men haven't been as encouraged, right? To be connected to their emotions and talk about your emotions
No,
and all that.
no.
It's not socially acceptable to, I mean, we're getting better, but it's still,
Yeah,
it's still not the norm. Yeah.
no, no.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You don't get encouraged to cry it out. You don't come into
No.
the locker room in your middle school soccer game and say, guys, I've had a rough week, and they all rally around you. Give me a hug,
Yeah.
bro.
I
You don't see a whole lot of
know.
that. No.
I wish it was that way, though. Can you imagine what it would be like if it was? But
Yeah, we'd
yeah,
have tons of feminine guys running around, right? There's probably a balance, right? We don't want to
there's
swing
a
the
balance.
pendulum too far, right?
Correct.
But
Yeah.
yes,
Oh
we
man,
could
that could
get a
be a whole
little
nother
better
show.
there. So, all right,
Yeah.
number five. So now we're. It seems like I'm like conflicting myself every one of them, but
That's
there's
okay.
reason behind it. So number five is just that sex connects us, and so we've got to recognize that in the church world, people love to talk about soul ties, and over the years we've given all kinds of hyper damaging information to people in the name of trying to keep them abstinent, which is not
Yes.
healthy. You've heard all these examples of the woman's the flower, and each time you have sex, a petal's pulled off, and all you got left is this raw stem, and all the or
Yeah.
chewing gum, or everybody spitting in a cup, and who wants to drink it? You got all these nasty, weird, shaming analogies. But the reality is that because of the chemical releases and all that kind of stuff, it does connect you to another person, which is why, in the context of marriage, it provides one more piece of glue for the couple who has made a covenant commitment to each other. So outside of that context, you're connecting yourself in ways with somebody that again will allow you to do a lot of the other stuff we talked about, overlook the red flags and feel like you're closer than you are, and put up with stuff that's not healthy and not set healthy boundaries and all those kind of things. So I think we just have to know that, the research shows when you have sex and the chemicals are released, people prefer that person's look, their smell, their touch. All these unconscious things are happening that you don't want that being in the midst of what is the dating process, which is an evaluative time
Yeah.
of trying to figure that out. And I'm not going to put you on the spot for any of your dating relationships, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you and a lot of the people you work with could give you stories after stories of staying in a relationship too long, or trying to believe the best, or some of these things that when sex is not present in a relationship, it's a lot easier to be like, that is not for me, and I'm not dealing with that.
Yes. But I mean, like, to your point earlier, it really is. It's like, okay, I mean, I can't believe I'm about to say this because, yeah, but it's like, go take, maybe they snort a bunch of like cocaine, go do like shoot up with heroin, and then go try to find a mate. How well you think you're gonna do when your brain is that, flooded with chemicals, right? So
Yeah.
I also think that, I mean, I've seen studies that have shown that yes, chemicals are released for both people, but early on, women, we tend to release, I can't remember which hormone or chemical it is specifically, but we release a chemical where men don't so early on. So it's almost as if our bodies actually bond to the man. So
Hmm.
it definitely connects us. However, a lot of women think they have to do that. They have to have sex really early in order to keep the man. And the reality is, sex doesn't bond men to women so early on. Men have to generally have an emotional connection. And, I really want to empower women. Like, men are going to adhere to the parameters that we set for them. So you really do get, like, you get to be in the driver's seat here. You get to decide. And it's setting yourself up for so much less anger and pain and heartbreak when you really take the time to evaluate someone before you give your body over to them. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well said.
this is a
Well
big
said. So
connector.
let me recap my
Mhm.
5 thoughts. Sex blinds us, weakens us, confuses us, separates us, and connects us. And all of
Oh,
that is going to not only cause more emotional and relational hurt when the relationship doesn't work out, but is going to
yeah.
make it, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's going to make it more difficult for somebody to evaluate. The dating process is about evaluating this other person and the potential of them being a lifelong partner. And if you've got stuff getting in the way of that, and sex does, you may be making decisions that are not best for you a
Mhm,
few
mhm.
a few years down the road.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. Good stuff.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that is Megan and Eric's thoughts on 5 reasons not to have sex before marriage. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Drop a comment in the comment section below. If you haven't downloaded Modern Daters Playbook, grab that as well. And we'll see you next time right back here.